Welcome, everybody, and welcome to our Feature Fridays. Today, I am co-founder, not just today, but every day. I'm co-founder Jackie Kwan of Uplifter, and with me today is Garrett Trott, our product expert. Hi, Garrett. How you doing today?
Good, good. And yourself?
Good. I'm doing all right, and I am excited because today we are going to be talking about batch editing programs and copying seasons. And the reason why I am excited about that is that because it is that time of year where a lot of clubs are starting up a brand new season, whether they're getting ready for registrations for summer camps or maybe even doing some sort of late last minute registrations for some day camps or spring break camps that they're setting up right away. So the batch edit and season copy feature is a great feature to take advantage of. And there's tiny little bits and pieces that you probably don't know how to leverage to get the most out of these features. And Garrett's going to walk us through how to do that and how to leverage some of those little tips and tricks that will speed things up for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jackie. So yes, you are correct. We're going to talk about batch editing and season copying today. So to begin, I'm logged in as a site administrator, of course, and I've just navigated to products and classes. Classes. Now, normally this is products and programs, but we just have some terminology change on this site here. This brings me to my list of programs or classes, however you'd like to call them. And as you can see, there's quite a few. There's in fact 2 different pages here. The item that we're going to start with today is batch editing and just talking about how to quickly update and edit the programs that you have all at once rather than one by one. If you've only got 1 or 2 programs, it might make sense to go to this page and click edit here and go in and edit things. But if you're working with more than a couple programs, it probably makes sense to use the batch edit feature. This feature is available along the toolbar here, just a batch update. But before we jump into that, we may also want to refine the list of programs that we're working with. For instance, we can use the filters on the left-hand side here to filter by season or category, etc. I'm going to filter by season, and in so doing, I'm going to refine the list of programs or classes that we're working with. And now that I'm happy with this list, I'm going to select Batch Update, which will respect the filters that I've just applied. When I select Batch Update, we're brought to this page here, which looks a lot like an Excel spreadsheet. In fact, any familiarity with Excel will lend itself to your experience here because there are a lot of features and functions that will work in the same way in terms of interacting with things. For instance, if I want to work with a specific cell, just one cell here, I can do so by double-clicking the cell, and I can begin to enter in the data that I want to enter in. If I want to update more than one cell in close proximity, I can perform the update that I want, and then very much like Excel, you'll see this little blue box here, and I can use, I'm going to zoom in on that so you can actually see it, this little blue box down in the corner here. I can actually grab that and drag it to the cells that I want to change with this new data, and that'll perform that action on only those cells that I highlight. So that's pretty handy to have. But what if I want to change all of these cells, not just these few? In that instance, I want to use cell number 1 of a column. Now what you'll notice right out of the gate here, and I apologize, we should double back on things here, you'll notice that each program of mine is set as a row here. And then each column within this table is a piece of information about that program. So you can see the name, the category, the SKU, etc. If I want to affect all of the information for all of my programs based on a specific piece of data, I can do that in cell number 1. So cell number 1 of the column is a special cell. If I go into cell number 1 into date time, for instance, I could say this time. And when I do that, it changes every single row within that column. Now I can do that for any cell number 1. I can change all my dates to a specific date. I can flow to the right hand side here and see the remaining elements and pieces of information for my programs, and I can change my start times, my end times, etc. Just as an FYI, a few pieces of information you won't be able to change through this are your categories and category levels, your seasons, and your event start and end times. So beyond that, as I'm sort of going through this, I can, of course, use cell number 1 to my advantage, but there are 2 instances where cell number 1 will actually offer me some unique tools beyond the unique tools they're already offering. So class name and class SKU will offer me further tools than what we've seen here. When I select this little arrow down icon, This is going to offer me three unique tools: update, append, and replace. And out of all three of these, replace is going to be your best friend. By selecting replace, I can search for something and I can change it to something else. So maybe I'm going to search for kids and I'm going to change that to youth. Maybe we're just changing our terminology. So now I can select yes, and everything in here that said kids now says youth. Now that's powerful on the class name, but it's even better when you're working with your class SKUs, your program SKUs. So here we see this is my fall winter season, and you can see fall winter dash 20, and maybe we've got some changes here. Maybe it actually doesn't include the 19 season anymore. So what I can look for is 19 dash 20, and I can change it just to the 20. Maybe it's just in the year 2020. So when I do that, it changes all of my SKUs. Now we're going to see why that's powerful and why that's important in a little moment when we talk about our season copy feature, but I want to familiarize you guys with the tools that are available through this batch editing feature. So as you are progressing through updating all of this information, you're scrolling to the right and finding those pieces of info that you want to change, cost and number of max capacity and stuff like that. When you're happy with what you've done, you're going to want to click update. But before you've done that, however, you want to review the update column. Now this column is on the far left-hand side and indicates which one of these programs you're actually going to be saving. So for instance, I've made a change to our SKUs, but maybe I don't want the SKUs of the men's programs to change. But since I used cell number 1, it affected every row within that column, and so it has affected my men's programs. But if I don't want that to be true, I simply uncheck these boxes before I click update, and now it's only going to update the ones that do have a check mark. And now when I go back to my men's programs, they'll have the old SKUs before I made this change. So that's the basics of batch updating. Now again, this is available through products and programs where you can select it from the toolbar, but there's a very similar tool that looks and interacts almost identically to this, but has a bit of a unique sort of parameter to it, and that's the season copy feature. This is available through products and programs, or products and classes as we see here, and then seasons. On your seasons page, you're going to be able to create new seasons, edit existing seasons, etc. But you can also select an existing season through this drop-down option and choose the copy option to replicate it and all the programs within it. Now that can save you a huge amount of time when you're working towards creating a brand new season. So in this instance, we're going to copy our fall winter season and we're going to generate a summer season. We're going to start a brand new summer season. So I've selected the season that I want to copy from this dropdown, and I select this copy option here. Now this brings up a pop-up that gives me two distinct options. Number one is I can choose to create a brand new season, or I can copy this season that I've chosen into an existing season that already exists in my system. So if I wanted to, I could duplicate all the programs in fall winter, but that's not really what we're going for right now. So I'm going to go back to new season here, and I get to specify a start and end date for my new season. Let's say it starts in July 1st. Goes all the way to, let's do August 31st. Now that I've set my dates, I get to also specify whether or not I want my classes or my programs to save as beta. I'm going to select yes for this because when I generate my programs, I don't want anyone to be able to see them. And beta status ensures that only those with the beta purchasing permission can actually see them, which by general rule is just your administrators. We also have the ability to enable priority registration. What this is going to do is look at those who have registered in the previous version of the programs we're about to copy, and it's going to place those participants on a waitlist for the new programs that we generate from copying. So this is a very powerful tool, but if you find, if it's generally true to say that your participants will actually increase or move to the next tier of their classes and programs, then you probably don't want to do this. But if you do have your participants joining the same classes year after year, then this is a very, very fast and easy way to make sure that they have a priority over those newcomers. I'm going to select to not enable this for now, and I'm going to select copy to season. When I do that, I then get prompted to finish up creating my season first. So I'm going to say this is summer 2020. I can double check my season start and end date, my age cutoff date. A lot of this stuff might have default dates, which you can of course update. I can also introduce holidays, exception dates, season event days as I need to. But in this particular instance, I'm not concerned about that, so I'm going to just select save.
One thing that I just wanted to note here is that when you're actually copying seasons, in the background, what Uplifter does is if you're copying a fall-winter season from one year to the next, if you had already pre-set up, a bunch of holidays or exceptions from the previous season, in the background, the season copy feature will actually try and extrapolate those same holidays and exception days to the following season. So if, for example, your season always starts the first day after Labor Day, and then you have like a Thanksgiving holiday and then a Christmas holiday, and those happen, X number of weeks after that first day. When you actually copy that season over, it will try and actually re-extrapolate those dates and exception times. It's not an exact science, or it's not going to be perfectly exact, because if the length of your season changes for any reason, or if those dates sort of shift just slightly, like for example Easter is always hard to predict because we actually don't take into account the first full moon after the spring equinox in order to determine your season copy feature.
Oh,
Uh,
I thought we did do that.
no, I'm
No,
sorry, I don't have that
don't have the moon
calculation.
calendars.
No, no, but I will work on that next
Yeah,
time.
please do.
So yeah, so a lot of those things will sort of automatically work for you. You just have to sort of double check that before you actually click save on the season.
Thank you very much, Jackie. And that is also true when it comes to the programs that generate. Now, we'll talk about this screen in just a second, but we're going to shift slightly to the right-hand side, and we're going to take a peek at the first class and the last class, because these dates are also generated by the system based off of the season that it's copying. And that means that it might be trying to push your programs onto a date that's not quite accurate. It's going to do its best, but you may want to just double check these. Well, you should double check all this information and just make sure that this is falling in the correct place that you want it to. Excellent. So now that we've talked a little bit about that, let's double back to what you're seeing here when you first land on this page. So I've selected a copy, I've made a new season, I've generated my season, and now the system's looking to generate the programs themselves for my new season. And what we're going to see here is that all of our programs are marked to create, which we'll talk about again in just a moment, but it's very similar to the update option. And we also see two other elements that are different from what we were seeing when we were updating our programs rather than creating new ones. And that is this dash copy here at the end of our program name and at the end of our program SKU. So this dash copy here, just indicating that you are copying a program. It's not as important for the program name, but it is a good indicator. But we can get rid of this really fast. We can go here and use that tool that we talked about previously. We can replace. So I'm going to select to replace, and I'm going to replace dash copy with nothing. And in so doing, now all my class names are looking good. But now I can also do the same for the SKU. So I can replace dash copy with nothing. But if I leave it at that, when I try to create these programs, I'm going to see a bunch of errors. And that's because you can only use a SKU one time within your system. And having removed that dash copy from these SKUs, they're now the exact same as my previous year's SKUs. But not to worry, because we can use that same tactic, that same technique, to update these SKUs one more time and utilize our new season. So this time we're going to select that option and we're going to replace. We're going to do FW19-20 because that's the season that we were copying from, the fall winter season. And we're just going to copy it to summer 2020. And there we go. Now all of our SKUs are up to date, they're ready to go, and they're unique, so we can save with confidence. Now, before we do that, of course, we want to review the rest of our data. We want to just make sure that everything's where it should be. We want to make sure that it's happening at the times it should be happening, etc. You may also want to double check the day and time, because as you shift these days, it may not be true to say that this is a Monday, Wednesday, Friday program, or maybe it doesn't happen on Sundays anymore. You just want to sort of double check that type of information. Beyond that, be sure to double check the max registrations, the pricing, etc., just to make sure that all of this is correct. And when you are happy with that, you're going to select create. But just like with the update column, you also have a create column, which we touched on just a little bit a moment ago. This create column lets you mark which programs you do and don't want to include during this creation process. For instance, these poor men's programs, I don't want them anymore. We don't have a men's program anymore. So I'm copying this previous season, but there's a few programs that I don't want. So I'm going to mark these off and say I don't want to create these. And finally, when I'm happy with the ones that I've done, I'm going to click create. Now, it is important to note that this create column and when editing the update column should be your last step. And the reason being is because you're going to be mucking about with all this data and changing all these different things. And when you do, if you keep an eye on this guy right here, I make a change to this. If I affect the whole column, when you make an update, the system assumes that you want to update and create that program. So it rechecks that off. So the last thing you should do is just do a quick run through of the create column and say, you know what? No, I actually don't want these ones, but the rest of them I do. And when you're happy, you hit create just like you hit clicked update. And look at this, all of these. Oh, because I've changed the last class date. So I'm going to change that back.
While you're doing that, some administrators do actually opt to, because if they don't have all the information at hand right away, they might actually opt to just save sooner than later. Like once you actually update your SKUs so that they are unique, you could actually create them and then go back to the actual class listing, filter by the season, and just come back and edit, just so that they can actually do some work in batches. That's another way that you could accomplish that as well, so that you don't run into that little situation that Garrett has
So aptly portrayed. No. Yes, thank you so much for saying that. That is absolutely true. So if you are unsure about the data, but you know the programs exist, that's no problem. Just make sure that your SKU is unique and hit create. And that way they're in your system, they're ready to go, but you can fiddle around with the finer details later on. So now that I've hit create, what's happened is the system has generated those programs for me, and it's now brought me to the batch edit page, the page that we're already familiar with. You can see that this button has changed from create to update. You can see that this is now batch update my programs rather than batch update or batch create. So now we can fiddle around with this data if we want to, or we can exit this and go to our class listings. And when we do, we will see that we now have a brand new summer season that we can filter by, and we can see our beta programs. And that is the batch edit and season create features. Now, Jackie, would you like to add anything else?
How did you know I wanted to say something, Garrett?
You didn't unmute yourself. I don't know. I'm just psychic.
If we could go back to the season copy feature, just want to talk about a couple of use cases of why you might want to actually copy into an existing season. And these are a couple of tips and tricks that I know that when I'm actually working with a number of programs or trying to create a season for a club or organization, a couple of reasons. Number one, you might have gone through the season copy process. You typed in a new season with a start date and an end date. You got through to the program creation page where you have this listing of programs, but for some reason had to step away from your desk, or lost your session and you had to re-log in, and you thought, oh, I've created my season, but none of my programs saved. Well, in that case, you can very easily copy to the existing season the season details that you would have created at the very beginning that define the start and end date of the season, and all those holidays and exception days are still there, but you can still go back and copy the previous season's programs just into the existing season that you created just now. So you don't have to start the process all over again. So this gives you a way to sort of sidestep those couple of that first step there, and just sort of rework into the process that you were working on previously. Another thing that I often do like to do is when I'm actually creating a series of programs or a schedule from scratch for a club, if the club actually has a number of programs that are very, very similar, or you have a lot of sort of repeated data, what I might do is I might work in chunks. Even though we have a feature that allows you to copy program to program to program one by one, what you might want to do is say, you know what, I'm going to work on just my kids programs first. So you create your 5 or 6 kids programs for the week. And then you think, you know what, my women's program always comes after my kids program. So what you can actually do is, after you've created those first 5 or 6 kids programs, you can come and actually use the season copy feature to copy those 5 kids programs from the same season into itself, and then just go through and change the names and change the times so that you can recreate those programs. So very quickly, instead of having to create, 40 or 50 programs for a club, because that's what your schedule looks like, and do them one by copying them, you can almost do them in batches of 4 or 5 or 6 or however many groups of programs you want to do at one time. So it is a way to sort of redo a lot of the work very quickly without having to do them one by one. Did that make sense? Hear it
It
listening
made
to me?
sense to me, but
Yeah. Maybe you want to reiterate that with like better words. Try.
I can't word any better than that. Um, no, yeah, that's exactly true. So there are some instances where you want to copy a season into itself, and one of the tricks that Jackie was saying, just to sort of reiterate, was that you can essentially duplicate existing programs within a season in order to very rapidly generate your new series of programs. It is something that you can do. It's a little, you need to be quite organized in order to do, especially when you get into the larger numbers of programs, but it is a very fast way of working. So definitely something to look into and sort of practice with. You can, of course, archive seasons as well. So if you want to make a practice season, you can definitely do that, and then you can tuck that away and and just never speak about it again. Excellent. So that is everything. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to me mumble on for this 20 minutes here. Jackie, anything else you want to add?
I want to thank everybody for listening to me mumble on for the last 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone. I hope everybody is doing well this spring day, and thank you for joining us on Feature Fridays. We will be here again next week, same time, Feature Fridays here on Facebook Live. Next week, are we going to be talking about reports?
Yes. Yep, reports. So that's a new word for you, isn't it? No,
Reports?
reports.
I just wasn't sure if we had finally decided on what our next episode was. So I just wanted to make sure that you gave you enough opportunity to cut me off if I was wrong.
Yeah, so so next week is reports. We'll be talking about saving reports, sharing reports, creating default reports. So if you are an accountant or really just pulling reports about anything about your system, that's definitely going to be a one that you want to take a look at.
Great. Thank you again. And we will see everybody next week.
Thank you. Take care.